Hi, everyone, and welcome to our final workshop for Nano Prep and come November. And this actually isn't for Nano Prep, it's actually for what we do after Nano. And so let's go ahead and get started here. Oh, and so my background here, this is from an episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine where some of the characters were actually shrunken down to a tiny, tiny size. So their entire shuttlecraft was the size of like my thumb or something like that. And they had to go into a computer and do some stuff to help save their ship. And so they were beamed down in there, but they also beamed down with a bubble of atmosphere, right? Because the oxygen atoms in their ship, when it was shrunk down, also shrunk. And so I thought that was kind of cool as a play on kind of like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but from a little bit more real scientific, plausible viewpoint there, at least in terms of the oxygen content. But anyways, I'm babbling. Let's get started. This is what you're really here for, not to listen to me babble about Star Trek. All right, so after Nano, this is when the real work actually starts now, but actually so does the real fun. So first of all, congratulations. If you made it this far, the end of November, you are a NaNoWriMo winner. Unfortunately, your novel is not done. Your novel is not ready. It needs revision. And in revision is where the real writing happens. This is where you can nitpick about the right words or the right phrasing, the right structure. You can make sure that the order is right. Like, no, I need to say this earlier in the novel or reveal this later in the novel and things like that. So after Nano, we're going to have just a quick wrap-up survey that I'll send out for you. You may need to finish your novel. So 50,000 words may not be enough for your first draft of the novel. It simply might not be done. All right, most novels are going to be somewhere between 50 to 100K, depending on the genre. And of course, some novels are well over 100K as well. I say that if you're somewhere between 65 to 75K, that's a decent average that you can aim for if you're not sure of a proper length for your novel. If you write 1,000 words a day in December, you can actually reach 80,000 words. So if you just continue Nano for one more month, and instead of writing 1,700 words, you write 1,000, you can really push the word count on your novel. Once your novel is done, though, so let's say you hit 50K, it's a first draft, it's done. You know you're going to make it longer, but you need to revise it first. Don't start revising right away. Plan to revise at least 30 days later, so sometime in January or later on. Before that, you can make some preparations in the meantime, and you can review the revising resources available at NaNoWriMo or get a book on revising or something like that. But I guess the first thing you need to actually ask yourself is, before you do that, is do you even plan on revising and publishing your novel? If so, you need to make a revision and editing plan. You need to figure out what your publishing goal is. Do you actually want to sell the novel, or you don't really care about selling it? You just want to publish it for friends and family and things like that. And then you need to decide on a publishing path. Are you going to go traditional publishing, self-publishing, or some other aspect? Now, I'll give you a tip here. Agents and publishers are heavily, heavily, heavily queried in December because of Nano. They think everyone at the end of November thinks that they have the next Harry Potter series and all of that. And agents and publishers are just inundated with, I hate to say it, but a lot of crap because none of it's been edited or revised yet. All right, you don't want to send out this raw stuff, and especially at a time of year where they're inundated with this, plus the major holiday season is well in motion there. And so hold off. Wait a few months, make sure you do a serious revision, and then you can consider querying these folks if that's part of your game plan. Right. There we go. So revising. Go 2 slides or 1? Okay, I had to double check there. All right. So revising is where the real writing and the real work actually takes place. It's where the art form happens, the crafting, all of that. Find a way that works for you, but I'm going to provide you a general framework here. The key here, though, is to make sure that you aren't afraid to make changes, deletions, or any types of additions to your novel. You have to be ready to make those. And that is harder than you think it's going to be. Trust me on this. I thought this was a silly word of advice, and it was so hard for me to do with my first novel. So when I go about revising, the first thing I do is print it out. I need the paper to write on when I do revision. You may not need to print it out. You may have other methods that you prefer. Next, read it as a reader. Don't worry too much about editing or revising at this point. Just read through it. What works? What doesn't work? Is there anything that's confusing? Is there some place where the pacing seems off, like you just need some place to catch your breath, or it's so slow you need something to wake you up? What did you love about the novel? Is there anything that you absolutely hated about it? Find the issues at this point. Step three is you're going to tear it apart. You're going to focus on the forest. Focus on making a great story. The plot, the pacing, the character arcs, the order of events, everything like this. Tear it apart, get it all fine and dandy to where you think it's going to work for you. Then move forward with writing the revised draft. You're going to repeat steps 1 through 4 until you have the story that you want. Once you're happy with your revised draft, you're going to move from focusing on the forest to focusing on the trees. This is your polishing step. This is where you're going to focus more on the spelling, the grammar, and the punctuation. You will also want to consider doing some editing. And you may think, well, isn't editing what I just did? Well, in a way, some of this is editing, and some of this is involved in certain types of editing. But for me, the major difference between editing and uh, revising is who's doing it. Now, I don't know if this is actually an official distinction, but it's the one I use in my head. And so to me, if I'm doing it, it's revision. And if a trained professional is doing it, it's editing. Again, that may not be official, but that's how I keep them different in my head. And it's because the two are very, very similar, and they're often considered to be one and the same when they actually aren't. I highly recommend getting your manuscript professionally edited before or after you have it revised. There's a lot of different types of editors out there, some with different names for very similar job functions. So, for example, you have a copy editor versus a proofreader. What's the difference between them? Honestly, I don't know. All right, so they're very similar. I'm sure a copy editor would, and versus a proofreader, they know exactly the difference between them and might even be insulted that I don't know the difference, but I'm sorry I don't. Um, but I do recommend some sort of developmental editor and some sort of proofreader. The developmental editor is going to look at this. They're going to tear it apart themselves. They're going to focus on making your story good. They're going to examine your plot. They're going to examine the pacing, the characters, all of it. And they're going to make suggestions that they believe is going to make the novel better. With my developmental editor, I was shocked. She gave me 6 pages of feedback, and I thought that wasn't a lot. I was actually a little disappointed. I'm like, I paid for this. I was actually kind of, to be honest, a little pissed off. But then when I actually went through it, those 6 pages were golden. I was so happy, so worth the price there because they really strengthened my novel. I did not do everything my developmental editor suggested. I did all but like I think 1 or 2 things. All right, so that's how amazing it was. One thing she suggested was I remove these little like background things I have at the beginning of each chapter from the encyclopedia kind of from Lunar One. But they to me were important for the world building, and it's you see those sometimes in sci-fi novels, and I like those, and I purposely wanted those in there. So I ignored that, and I think there was one other piece of advice I ignored, but rest of it, 99% of it, I incorporated into my novel, and it truly strengthened the novel. And funny thing is, a lot of things she brought up were things I already knew were weak or needed addressed, but I kind of needed someone to offer suggestions on how to do that, and that's what she did. The proofreader is the one that is going to do the polishing. They're going to focus on the spelling, grammar, and punctuation. I still think it's important for you to do it because 2 sets of eyes are better than 1 set. So if you can catch a lot of it for them, and then they can focus on finding what you missed, that'd be great. Um, Now, if you do this, you may need to go through another revision process or more after the editors review the manuscript, all right? Because the development editor is going to have comments. You may need to do another revision process going through step 4 here again. Oops, sorry. And the editor, or I'm sorry, the proofreader obviously is going to have changes. So you're going to have to go through and do another revision to make those changes, put the commas in, change the misspelled words and all of that. Once you have a manuscript, you have to figure out what you're going to do with it. You put it on a shelf and forget about it, or are you going to publish it? Now, there's 2 primary publishing pathways you can take, traditional versus self-publishing. Traditional publishing is what most people think of when they think of publishing, where you write a book, submit it to a publisher, hope that it gets accepted, you get sent a contract, The publisher gets your book ready for market by doing the editing, formatting, designing, and all of that. Note here that the publisher may edit your book further, and you may not necessarily have full control over that. They may decide, hey, this scene doesn't work, that character doesn't work, we're going to change this or that, or have you change it, and you might get in dispute about that. You don't have full control of your work in traditional publishing, but there are a lot of other benefits. With self-publishing, you write the book, you start the publishing process, you have your book edited, formatted, designed by people that you hire. You choose where to self-publish it, and then you market your book. And I should here, market your book really should be over here in traditional publishing too, because this publisher, even though it says ready to market, they don't do much marketing themselves. They'll do a little bit. We'll talk about that. Here are some pros and cons of each. In traditional publishing, there's no upfront costs. You're may possibly, but not guaranteed to sell more books. It provides the social credibility of the traditional publisher. And the traditional publisher does all the publishing process for you, so you don't have to worry about any of it. But it's an extremely competitive process. It could take a year to 2 years to publish your book. You have less creative control, as I've already mentioned. You have significantly lower royalty fees. You're looking at probably making $1 per book when it's all said and done. So if your book sells for 15 or 20 bucks, you see $1 of that. And you have very minimal marketing support. They really aren't going to market your book. They might put it in a newsletter, put it on their website, and that's going to be about it. Self-publishing, you don't have the gatekeepers. You can publish your book in just a few months. You have full creative control. You have higher royalty rates and no limit as to how many books you can publish. So I'm not sure exactly how much I make, but so if I sell Lunar 1 for $15 on Amazon, I think I make somewhere between $3 and $4 a book, a copy there. And it might even be a little higher. Honestly, I'm not really sure. I don't remember. But it's definitely a lot higher than with traditional publishing. And there's really no limit to how many books you can publish. You can publish as many as you like. But there are significant upfront costs. It's difficult to sell books. This is difficult if you're in traditional or self-publishing. So don't think it's going to be easier to sell books in traditional publishing. It isn't. There's also a very large process to learn. And there's less of that social validation. People think self-publishing books are crap, when in reality, a lot of them are excellent. They make bestseller lists, they make Hollywood movies, all this type of stuff. But there is a lot of crap out there too. So, if you decide to go traditional publishing, the minimum that you're going to need is a list of agents to query, a list of publishers to query, a query letter. You're going to want one for agents and one for publishers. And you're going to need what's called a book proposal, which is going to be quite detailed. Talk about that in just a moment. Now, why don't you need a list of both agents and publishers? Well, some publishers you can query directly, but the larger the publisher, the less likely they will allow you to send in anything. They'll just reject it or throw it in the trash or something like that. A lot of publishers require agents to query on your behalf. And so if you want to get into those larger publishing houses, or at least have a chance at them, you're going to need an agent who will query on your behalf. So you're going to want a list of both if you go this route. Wait until you at least have a chapter or two completely, fully revised where it's sparkling and perfect before sending out any queries. In fact, some may even require 3 chapters. And do some background search on what needs included in these query letters and in book proposals. So in a book proposal, you're often going to need some recent related titles, your target audience, some sort of marketing strategy, because again, they are not going to market for you. A lot of people think they do, they aren't. You're going to need a book tagline and an overview. You're going to need sample pages and or chapters. You're going to need a book outline, so on and so forth. Let's see, I think I have a good reference for this at the end of this presentation. So I have a good book that will outline a lot of these things that you'll need. It's a slightly dated, so you might want to verify it, but it's still good. Self-publishing. With this, the first time you go through it, a book coach may be useful, but it's not necessary. I didn't do it with a book coach. I just kind of learned on my own, but I did use resources from book coaches to learn what I needed to do, okay? Or at the very least, if you don't get a book coach, you'll need a book or some kind of guide or course to help you through the process. You'll need to set up some sort of, you'll need to set up an Amazon account, maybe an Ingram Spark account, which will get your book into other online locales, maybe a Barnes& and Noble account, etc. These are essentially print on demand distributors. So when someone orders your book, it's printed on demand. You'll want to get your book edited and proofread. You'll want to hire a book cover designer or do it yourself, but that can be a little risky. Those tend to look a little amateurish. So I do recommend hiring an actual professional book designer. Trust me, you're going to be very happy if you do. You need to buy ISBNs for your books. Your books need to have ISBNs and they don't come free. So you have to buy them. You can buy, I think, one at a time, or you can buy them in groups of 10, perhaps. I bought a group of 10. I have them up here anytime I write a new book. I assign the ISBN, I go in and I register the ISBN to that book. You need to format the book. I do mine in a program called Scrivener or Scrivener. I'm not sure exactly how you say that, but it's it's a little, there's a little tiny bit of a learning curve, but once you learn that learning curve, trust me, it's going to save you so many headaches when it comes to getting your book ready for self-publishing. If you tried to do it in Microsoft Word, I just imagine it would be a nightmare. I don't know for sure, but I imagine it'd be quite difficult. You also need to develop marketing strategies for yourself, and you may even need to buy ARC copies, advanced reader copies, to send out to reviewers, beta readers, and the like. The total cost for all this can vary greatly. It really depends on the quality of the work you're getting. Now, an editor is going to be about $30 or more for 1,000 words. So you're looking at about $1,000 plus. I think that's about what I paid for my developmental editor, somewhere between 800 and 1,200. I don't exactly remember. Your proofreader is a little cheaper, about $15 per 1,000 words. So you're looking at about $750 or higher for a good proofreader. I went cheap. I hired a local community college English major. I did not check the work afterwards. I went ahead and published, assuming that it was just fine. I made all the corrections that were made, and as I was making the corrections, I found a few more, and that should have been a red flag for me. But I went and published, and then after I had people buy like 40, 50 copies of my book across different people, I went back and reread the book myself and realized that there were tons and tons and tons of typos in it. I was very upset, but I spent like $100 on the proofreader. So I got what I paid for. All right, so my second proofreading I did myself, and I did 2 or 3 very, very careful proofreads to get it out. But that one I could have really damaged my prospects with making that novel be bigger, because those 40 or 50 people that bought it initially, that was my largest sale of that book, and they all got a crap book. So don't underestimate that cost and that need. Your book cover is going to cost anywhere from $500 to $1,500 usually. Mine was, I think, around 1,000. Your ISBN, I think you can get a group of 10 for around $100, give or take, but I didn't double check that cost. Your ARC copies, can cost $100 or more. To get one copy of my book printed for an author copy is just shy of $4 plus some shipping and handling fees. And so it's not too pricey to get those ARC copies out. Now, you can certainly find discount editing and proofreading services out there. You can find covers under $500, but none of this is really going to be worth your money. Remember, you get what you pay for. Now, it doesn't mean that you might not find some good deals, all right? So you may be able to find a great proofreader for $300 or a wonderful cover for $350. They do exist. You just have to be very, very careful. There are some alternative publishing options out there. One that's kind of popular are hybrid publishers. This is where both the publisher and author share in the cost and risk of publishing the book. So the author pays some upfront costs to get the book published and distributed. The publisher will often pay for some editing services, will do some of the marketing and design for you. However, the specific responsibilities do vary from publisher to publisher, so you need to make sure they're outlined ahead of time. Some advantages here is that the author gets higher royalties than in traditional publishing, but they're going to be lower than if you fully self-published. But you usually have a better chance of wider distribution than you do with self-publishing. So self-publishing is very hard to get into bookstores and libraries and such, but in hybrid publishers, they have some social credentials there, and so they have some wider distribution options. These publishers also have a customer mailing list. They have social media and all these things that they'll use to promote your book, because again, some of the risk is shared by them. There are so-called vanity publishers, and they come under some other names as well. That's why I put for vanity in parentheses here. This is where the author pays a publisher to produce the book. The publisher takes on zero financial risk. It's kind of similar to hybrid publishers, but there is absolutely no author support at all. There also may be hidden fees and terms that you are a little sketch depending on the exact publisher, although others are completely legit. So not all vanity publishers are like this, all right? They have this perhaps misconception about them that they are like this, and some of them certainly are. So just be very careful about that. But all of them have zero interest if your book sells or not. All right. Their money comes 100% from you paying them to produce and print your book. As I said, they tend to have a poor reputation, but there are some really legit ones out there. Um, but for most of you, I recommend avoiding them unless your goal is simply to get your book printed. You don't care about selling it. You just want to make the family recipe book for everyone for the holiday season, or you want that genealogy book just for your friends and family and no one else. In this case, vanity publishers are awesome. They're easy to work with. Boom, you just get it done and you're golden. So, did you notice one thing? I stressed it a few times here. No matter how you decide to publish your novel, sorry, your novel, not you novel, no one does any of the marketing for you. As I said, sure, some publishers may have mailing lists. They may sell a catalog to a live or give a catalog to a library and bookstore, but they aren't doing any active promotion of your book unless it's one of the few that they think are actually going to be megastars. Then they'll put some backing behind this, right? But for most of the books that these publishers sell, they don't do any marketing for it. So the marketing has to come from you. That includes most, if not all, the associated costs. Here's some ideas here. This is 101 ideas. Here are the first 19, right? But I recommend that you buy a book or get a blog or a book coach or someone to help you through this process. Something to guide you on what you can do for marketing your book. So your finishing steps here is to finish your novel if you haven't done the draft yet. Don't lose your momentum. You've already gotten 50,000 words. Get to the end. Once you have it finished, if you haven't finished it already, lock it away for 30 to 45 days before you begin the revision process. Use these steps I provide you here to help begin the revision process. Get your novel professionally edited and proofread. And not design on a publishing model, decide on a publishing model and take the steps suggested. For example, this would be the time to get a cover designer or finalize the book dimensions with your designer. And finally, please stay in touch and let me know how your novel progresses. Right? So shoot me an email, say, hey, I just published and all this, and I'll let others know as well. So I'll help you market your book by letting people know that someone that did NaNo with me has published your book, and I appreciate people just taking a look at it. Right? So thank you very much. Again, if you have any questions or comments, shoot me an email. Check out my website for additional resources. And congratulations on finishing NaNoWriMo and the first draft of your novel. Thank you so very much for joining me through these workshops and for joining me next month through NaNo. I hope to see you at the end of the month with a novel in your hands. Take care. Have a wonderful November. Ciao.